Okay, so now let's talk more about this market. We see that the banks, and speaking of the banks, it was in the news that forbearance forbearance directive from the central bank at first had caused some jitters across the market, particularly for the banks. But at the same time, the banks have now come in to reassure investors, particularly the likes of Fidelity Bank, Zenith Bank, as well as Access Bank, and some others are going to follow suit. They've all mentioned that by June the 30th, that's by the end of this month, just over less than 2 weeks from now, that they would have cleared all the issues as regard the forbearance the directive from the central bank. Of course, that's one of the reasons why the market is really on fire. As we see the market's index level here, 117,088.62. But intraday, we saw a little bit of a profit-taking downturn on some other key elements of the market. But of course, we'll be tracking the intraday market numbers with our guest on the show just in a couple of seconds from now. Now, for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, 94,578.50. That's the market number, but that was in the negative for that market. A little bit of fast fingers there. Now, talk about the EGX30. EGX30 for intraday is down more than 1.5%, 30,350.20. While for the close of Wednesday's trading session, the Nairobi Stock Exchange All-Share Index was in the green, 0.89%. Of course, we see lots of bargain hunting going on in that market. Of course, that market is expected to open Thursday's trading session in the green. So now let's take a deeper look into Nigeria's equities markets and also talk about the banks, because the banks are still in focus. On one side, we're counting down to the recap deadline, which is sometime next year, around March of next year. So now, but let's talk about the forbearance directive, which this is the aftermath. That announcement, the announcement was made sometime last week, over the weekend, and then we saw the impact. But this time we're seeing a positive side of that impact. And so let's delve deeper into that issue. And we have Omotola Imafidon, equity trader with First Security Brokers, to give us details about that. Thank you for joining us, Omotola.
Thank you, Anita. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, so I can see that investors and you traders are quite happy with this index level and the gains that we had in just one day. Now, can you tell us how are the sentiments for the banks, as regards this forbearance directive and other developments within the markets?
Okay, thanks so much. So what we saw early in the week was the fact that the market was sort of in panic mode. The banks sort of sold off at the beginning of the week when the CBN circular came out over the weekend, as people were not too sure who was affected and the extent of the impact. The CBN had said that banks that were caught up in the forbearance regime and the single obligor limit had to suspend dividend payments. And we know a key driver for investors in the market is their dividend. We're approaching the season for interim dividend payments, and we're hearing, okay, there will be suspension of dividend payments, executive bonus sees has to be suspended, and expansion into international markets for some of them. So that sort of sowed panic to the market. But as you've already mentioned, we saw that there's been reassurances from the banks. Some are saying that, okay, the positions will be fine by mid-year. Some by September. Some are saying, okay, we're putting structures in place. So market has responded positively to that. And coupled with the confirmation from the CBN that there's no need to panic, that the market is the banks are resilient, as we've said. So generally, the market responded positively to that from yesterday. So there were 2 days of decline at the beginning of the week, but yesterday we saw the recovery started coming, and today has been quite strong. So that's what we've seen.
Okay, so now let's move away from the banks and talk about the oil stocks. Seplat yesterday and Aradel, they were one of the major movers of the market, where we saw that 1.8 trillion naira in value added to the markets. Now, can you tell us what is the main driver for Seplat in particular? We know that it's an offshore oil company, but then also going into the energy market. So what is the latest driver for this equity as we speak?
Okay, yeah, thanks. So also the energy stocks they contributed positively to the market this week because of basically we've seen that oil price, the unrest in the Middle East has sort of made the oil prices to go higher. And of course, investors are also looking at it that, okay, there's still value in this space. So we saw Seplat, we saw Aradel taking higher. We saw renewed demand from mixed interest, both local participants driving demand in that space. So it's basically in response, positive response to the fact that oil prices are going up and their production levels too. It's improving as well. So those are the things that have driven the movement we've seen in that space.
Okay, so now that takes me to my final question with you. That okay, besides we've seen oil markets, that's Iran-Israel conflict, and then the forbearance. But besides all this, are there any other market developments or any events or announcement that would shape the direction of the market, whether up or down, in the remaining days of June?
All right. Okay, so for that, we are approaching end of Q2, that's end of H1. So the earnings expectation is also a major factor for investors at this point. Okay, so we're approaching when results will be released, when possibly maybe some of the financial stocks will be able to pay their dividends, and also the fact that a lot of stability is also in Nigeria economy at the moment. So those things will basically be the drivers of positive performance in the market. We can't rule out profit taking anyway, mind you, because people that bought the dip might want to also capitalize and book some profit. But we expect that earnings announcement, for instance, since Sterling Bank released their full year dividend over past few days, and market has responded positively to that. So that is that we've heard about PZ Wimba saying, okay, we are selling off a portion of our holdings to one of our subsidiary companies. And, that's for them, it's some income right there. So those are some of the other things that investors will be looking out to see. So there are a lot of things to look out for. So we just encourage investors to follow the news, stay with the fundamentally viable stocks, as we say.
I'm sure they definitely will, especially with your guidance. Like they always say, before any investment decision, consult your stockbroker. So thank you so much for your time on the show, and I'm sure investors will take your advice on that.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me. Bye.